Hello, friends. Welcome to the 12th edition of What the Facts, the most frequently asked questions about nutrition. Last week I covered foods that you eat to prevent cancer, and it was very well received. Check it out if you haven't had a chance. This video is going to be about determinants of disease. I've been speaking on the previous videos about determinants of good health. Eating plant-based and avoiding a lot of processed food, processed sugars, sodas and dairy products that are loaded with fat. But I want to drill down a little bit on some of the mechanisms, the pathways to disease, and I've borrowed a lot of what I'm going to say from this brilliant doctor, Dr. Robert Lustig, who's out of San Francisco, and he's all over the internet. He has some wonderful interviews about understanding metabolism and the pathways to disease. He describes 8 pathways, and I don't have time to go into all of them. I will say that they're very interesting, and if you're kind of geeky like me, you'll 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 check him out and listen to his hour-long videos. But anyway, the 8 pathways involve inflammation, and everybody knows inflammation when it's in the setting of disease can be life-threatening and disabling. There's also oxidation. Oxidation causes free radicals, and they can damage cell proteins and DNA. That's our genetic material. So oxidation and the production of free radicals is not good. That happens in disease states. It happens also after you exercise. And so there are mechanisms of dealing with that, but they become disrupted sometimes and can lead to disease. Also, there's lipid metabolism. Lipid means fat, and how fat is handled in the body can also determine whether or not you're healthy or not. To some degree, Alzheimer's involves a problem in lipid metabolism. At least some subsets of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a very, very complex disease that involves other pathways too. And glucose metabolism, diabetes, is disrupted in certain disease states. So lipid and sugar, fat and sugar metabolism. The remaining 4 are mitochondrial. Those are the powerhouse subcellular contents of our cells that are able to take glucose and make energy from it so we can maintain and survive. And there are some diseases that involve impairment of the mitochondria. There's methylation. That's what governs how our chromosomes, our genes are transcribed and expressed. Yes, we have a blueprint of genetic code that tells us what we're at risk for, but what we do and how we eat and how the environmental circumstances further governs how those genes are expressed. So it might alter our final destination by the things we do. And that there are many examples of that. Just because you may have genes for Alzheimer's, genes for diabetes, a number of different genes, by how your diet and lifestyle can alter how those genes are expressed and make it so they do not impact your life. So I said mitochondrial methylation, membrane dysfunction or membrane instability. Example of that is the gut, leaky gut, inflammation in the gut, often driven by processed foods that we eat and dairy and meats and stuff that our gut microbiome doesn't prefer. It prefers fiber. But when we eat a lot of these other things, it can disrupt the bowel and cause us to have increased risk for heart disease and hormone imbalance and immune problems, you name it. So that's membrane instability. And then lastly, I think that would be the next one would be the 8th one is autophagy. That's a cellular cleansing mechanism. There's a guy from Japan, a Japanese researcher that won the Nobel Prize for this back in, I think, 2015 or 16. Autophagy. Auto means self, phagy, P-H-A-G-Y. That's A-U-T-O-P-H-A-G-Y. Means self-eating. So there are mechanisms in our cells that are able to perform house cleaning, especially when we sleep. That's why it's good to have a good night's sleep, restorative sleep, 7 to 8 hours. That's when there's retooling in our brain, or there's refiling of documents that were created during the day. And so rest is important. Exercise helps with that autophagy. Autophagy gets disrupted by not not having enough rest, and not exercising, and eating a lot of foods that have toxins and things like that. So those are the pathways, the determinants of disease. And do you know all of these determinants can be modified in a good way to increase your health span by diet and exercise? All of them. And these pathways I mentioned also are pathways that can lead to cancer. So, yes, you can prevent cancer by making important decisions on what you put in your mouth that goes all the way through you. There's no other interface with the outside world, no other greater interface with the outside world than what we put in our mouths and swallow every day. So those are determinants of disease. And I'm very excited to focus on one area here, and that's the mechanisms that are involved with diabetes and pre-diabetes. I want you to leave this video with a much deeper understanding of diabetes, because a lot of people just think sugar, okay, carbs, but really it's not just sugar and carbs. It's a part of it. That's part of it. It's really fat. That's that pathway through how your body handles fat and sugar. But it's first the fat. Scientists over a decade ago found that the first thing that happens in insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is what precedes type 2 diabetes. Type 1, often that's a different mechanism, involves not having any insulin forming cells, and you're dependent on insulin. Type 2 is the more common form of diabetes that occurs a little later in life, but it's been occurring earlier and earlier because this is standard American diet. And it's driven by the fact that our body prefers glucose, a carb, for energy. The brain, the muscles, the liver, minute to minute, utilizes glucose, a sugar, for energy. And when there's too much fat, it infiltrates the cells, particularly of the liver, but also the muscle, and it renders our insulin receptors dysfunctional. Now, I like the way Dr. Neil Barnard puts it. He says that it's like putting gum in a lock, and your insulin is the key to unlock the lock and let glucose in so the cells can have their substrate to make energy. But when you put gum in the lock, which is the fat, saturated fat in particular, that's fat mostly it comes from animals. Your dairy products, your red meat, your white meat, your fish, your fowl, birds, whatever you eat, it has lots of saturated fat. Plants don't. Plants have, they don't have, well, I should say they don't have significant saturated fat. They have other kinds of fats that are healthier. So what happens is this fat tends to be the first step in causing insulin resistance. And then that's why blood sugars go up. And that's why the sugar you eat starts to become a problem, especially those simple sugars, the sugars in processed foods. We tend to think all sugars and carbs are bad, but no, our body thrives on carbs since the inception of humans. I mean, that carbs have been important. It's just that these processed carbs and these highly processed foods and pastries and cookies and donuts and even white flour is processed like sugar. Especially in fried foods. All of these things lead to, or can lead to, insulin resistance by altering how our body responds to insulin. And so when there's insulin resistance, the pancreas, where insulin is made, just kicks out more insulin. And that can happen over months to years before it conks out and becomes infiltrated with fat itself and no longer can make any insulin. And then you need to inject insulin. But this can be reversed in most cases. I'm not saying all, but in most cases, even once you've had the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, especially early on, it can be reversed by diet and exercise. But you have to give up the causes. And the main causes are that meat-related saturated fat. Meat, dairy, egg, fish. So just so you know, that's the main theme of insulin resistance, and it's thought that 50% of adults in this country have diabetes or are insulin resistant. And there's a higher percentage of people of color, of African Americans and Latinos that are insulin resistant and have diabetes. But there's things we can do. So I don't want this video to go any longer. If you like this video, please put a thumbs up on the YouTube, or just let me know you like it if it's not on YouTube and on another platform. Share this video with your friends and subscribe so that so I can get paid. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Anyway, yeah. So share this video with others. Check out my my website, www.fearlessmd21.com. And if you're at a loss, where do I start with this? I've really been motivated. Check the archives. I have a video on where to start, starting with the why. So go back and check that out. And if you're also at a loss for, well, where do I start with food? Well, I don't have any ideas with food. Get that Clubhouse app and come join me every Monday at 5 p.m. on Clubhouse, Authentically Plant-Based Club Room. And it's me and a bunch of other like-minded people, including a couple of chefs, professional chefs, that share our dishes. We share our dishes and answer any questions people have about it every week. So, and check out my Instagram, which is on my website, fearlessmd21.com. I post those same dishes on my Instagram account with the recipe. So, no excuses. We're giving you the tools. But I just want to have company on this journey. I want you to join me as we try to improve our health span. We don't want to just live long. We want to live healthy. And we can do this. So have a good day. Let's see, I don't have a quote to end this time. I'll just end with a tip. Batch cook. Batch cook some beans, your rice, your oatmeal. Do some batch cooking on the weekends or whenever your day off is. And remember, use your freezer. If you're going to go 3 or more days, like I like to come back to stuff I've cooked, 5, 6, 7 days later, put some of it in the freezer. So batch cooking really helps. So that during the week when you don't have much time, you can pull that stuff out, steam some kale or some broccoli or Brussels sprouts, whatever, throw that in with whatever you've batched cooked, and you got a meal. So that's my tip. Until next week, look, have a great day and days to follow. See you next time.